Good evening, everyone. We'll be starting in about 2 minutes. We're just waiting for a few more people to get online. Thank you.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing star 6.
Hello. I can hear myself on Audra's computer.
Perfect. Thank you. Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Alexandra Corey. Before we get started with tonight's webinar, I'm just going to run through a bit of housekeeping. For your audio, please keep your computer muted if possible. If you are listening with your computer, please keep it on mute. If you are listening on your phone, if you would not mind muting the line as well, it'll cut down on any backfeed.
Your line is now unmuted.
Also, if you are having trouble with the speakers or hearing anything on your computer, please dial into our conference line at 323-920-0091 and use the PIN 469-2139#. If you should have any questions during this webinar, please feel free to type them into the lower left-hand corner of your screen in the chat box, and we will try answering them throughout and at the end of the presentation. With that, I'm going to turn the mic over to the founder of the College Funding Coach, Brock Jolly.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Alex. And want to welcome everyone. I know there are some folks who were on an earlier webinar that we had some technical difficulties with, so I welcome everyone back. I am fairly confident that tonight will go much more smoothly. So thank you and welcome to June. It feels like the first 5 months of this year have just flown by. Really excited for tonight's webinar and to welcome back Dr. Beasley and spend some time talking through what is something that's become near and dear to our hearts. And Dr. Beasley is really one of the foremost experts in the world on this topic. So to dive in, let me start with where I start many of our college funding seminars, and that is by talking about what I consider to be the ultimate college goal. What I mean by that is that the ultimate goal really is twofold. First and foremost, for the student, we want to make sure that we select the right college. And so what I mean by that is there are lots of families out there who choose what I would classify as the wrong school. Not because it's a bad school, but simply because it's the wrong school for that particular student. Meaning maybe it is a school that mom or dad went to, or a brother or sister, or a school that is really close to home, or a school that's really far away from home, or a child goes to a school to play a sport or for some other endeavor. And it's not the right size, it's not the right geographic locations, lots of different reasons. And we always stress to families, very simply, make sure that you do the legwork on the front end, because it will save you an inordinate amount of time, headache, and of course, money on the back end. And then number two is graduate in 4 years with a career. We want to make sure that we get them off of mom and dad's payroll. For the parents, we want to make sure that we pay with cost-efficient dollars, and that means lots of different things. But most importantly, it means things like minimizing your taxes. And when I do live seminars with groups, one of the things that I frequently ask is, who here in the room pays too much in taxes? And inevitably, at least everyone who is paying attention will raise their hand and say, yeah, we definitely pay too much in taxes. And so I know that that bite is out there. And the question that I ask is, if you could legally, morally, and ethically reduce your tax liability, would you want to? And in 13 years of presenting seminars under the College Funding Coach umbrella, I have yet to have someone raise their hand and say, no, I would not want to legally, morally, and ethically reduce my tax liability. Where possible, and what we're going to spend an awful lot of time on tonight, is minimizing your college expenses, and where possible, increase your financial aid, whether that be need-based aid or merit-based aid. We want to make sure that we maximize the efficiency of your money. One of the things I always explain to families is all of us have a certain amount of money come through our hands over the course of our lifetime. What is critically important is that you use that money as efficiently and effectively as possible. That has an impact whether we're talking about retirement planning, vacation planning, or again, near and dear to our hearts, college funding planning. And then last but not least is minimizing lost opportunity costs. And all that means is all of us inevitably have leaks, wastes, and inefficiencies in our financial plans, whether intentional or not. And the key is to find those lost opportunity costs and try to redeploy those dollars, try to recapture those dollars where possible so that it can be used for college funding purposes. And then last but not least is I always am quick to remind families, whether you've got a senior in high school or you've got a kindergartner, it is coming sooner than you think. So my 18-month-old had his first day of preschool today, and I'm keenly aware that it is a long way off, yet right around the corner. What I would also tell you is that it is negotiating season. I know for a lot of the families who are on this phone call, it may be that your child has just been accepted to the school of his or her dreams. Now, perhaps that school is not necessarily mom and dad's school of their dreams from a financial perspective. And even though for a lot of you, the deadline for accepting or declining an offer of admission may have passed, what I think is important is that you understand that that deadline in many cases can be very artificial. And I'll have Dr. Beasley talk a little bit about that and just the process for negotiating, because what I think is important to understand is that that negotiation actually can occur right up to the day that your child arrives on the college campus. So a couple of things that we're going to talk about today are how to maximize your ability to qualify for aid. And again, we're talking about need-based aid, but more importantly, for purposes of today's conversation, merit-based aid. How you negotiate with schools after acceptance. And then thirdly, how to coordinate your awards or lack thereof and your finances. Let me just spend a second there, because really what I think is important to understand is a lot of times people aren't exactly clear on what we at the College Funding Coach do and what our partner relationships, such as that which we have with Dr. Beasley, what they do. And so let me take a step back, because Dr. Beasley is really going to talk a lot about what his firm does. And I think it'll be very clear why the College Funding Coach has partnered with Beasley College Prep. But let me just start by explaining what the College Funding Coach does is very simple. I always explain it this way. I got started in the financial planning business in 1999, 2000, that time frame. And for those of you who remember back to what the stock market was like in 1999, 2000, the stock market was going gangbusters. And so that's when I got into the financial planning business. And then shortly thereafter, what happened? Well, the stock market crashed. And I always am quick to tell people it was not entirely my fault. But what I think is important to understand is the question that I kept getting from parents over and over was, how in the world am I going to pay for my child's college education? And so early in my career, I really didn't know either, but I started to research it. And what I figured out was two primary things. I figured out, number one, is that most financial advisors and most financial planning firms really didn't have the first clue about how college funding and the associated strategies really worked. And then number two is that for most families, their money was in two primary locations. It was in the sticks and bricks of their home equity, and it was in their retirement plans, which is fantastic for retirement. It's not so fantastic when you need to send one or two or three or more children to college. And so in 2002, we founded the College Funding Coach with one primary goal in mind, and that is educating parents about how to make college more affordable. And what that means is understanding the rules of financial aid, how it works and how it doesn't work, what the rules of the game are, and bottom line, drawing that line in the sand to say, will I qualify for need-based financial aid? And helping families to conduct that calculation so that they understand exactly how that number is calculated. And then if a family can qualify for need-based aid, we want to show them how to optimize their ability to qualify for need-based aid. If we determine that a family can't qualify for need-based aid, that's okay, but it's a different set of strategies, because very frequently we need to create liquidity, we need to create cash flow to be able to pay for college. Now, a lot of that comes into play with what we'll talk with Dr. Beasley about this evening, with regard to merit-based aid and using other people's money or finding other people's money for college. So with that, let me talk for a second about college endowments. Every single college and or university has what is called an endowment. The endowment is money that can be used for many different purposes, whether that's building buildings, endowing professorships, buying computer equipment, doing research, or most importantly, for purposes of our parents and the families with whom we work, attracting and retaining really talented students. At the top of the list is a little tiny school up near Boston called Harvard. Now, Harvard has roughly $36 billion in their endowment. Okay, they're far and away the largest college endowment out there. Okay, behind them is Yale, as well as some big state schools like the University of Texas. Here in my backyard, and my alma mater is the University of Virginia, has about $6 billion. You've got big state schools like Ohio State. You've also got smaller schools like Pomona or Grinnell College, Georgetown. I mean, these are all schools that have over $1 billion in their endowments. again, that money is used to attract and retain talented students. I always point out the example of Harvard. The cost of attendance at Harvard is roughly $60,000 per year. The cost of attendance, that figure means your cost all in, meaning tuition, room and board, books, computers, supplies, travel expenses, personal expenses, etc. Now, with $36 billion in an endowment, Harvard could cover the full cost for every single one of their students in perpetuity. Yet Harvard still charges $60,000 per year. And my very simple question to you is, why? Well, the simple answer that you can give back is because they can. Because Harvard has the prestige and the clout that there are lots and lots of families who will gladly pay $60,000 a year in order to get that beautiful crimson bumper sticker on the back of their Honda Odyssey. But Harvard also realizes that there are lots of families who can't afford $60,000 per year, in which case they have $36 billion in an endowment with which they can pay the $60,000 for the families each and every year. Now, Harvard's a school that doesn't give much merit-based aid. Okay, they really just focus on need-based aid. And I'll allow Dr. Beasley to talk about that a little bit more. There are other schools that give lots of merit-based aid. And the key is really just understanding the schools that have money and that give money and how they give money. Let's talk about endowments for just 1 second, then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Beasley. What I would tell you is this: college is big business. And the sooner that families realize that it is big business and that it's a sales process, the more success they have in this process. I think one of the challenges that faces many families is that they sort of have this nostalgic view of what a college is all about from their own experience. And they don't realize that, I always use the analogy, it's sort of like an airplane taking off. And if you talk about choose your school, if you talk about the University of Nebraska, the University of Nebraska starts their classes on or about September 1st every year. And that airplane is taking off whether or not it's full at the time of takeoff. Meaning, if the University of Nebraska doesn't fill up all of their spots, classes still start on or about Labor Day. And the key is you want to position your student in such a way that not only does their top university want them and offer them admission, but hopefully they will offer them money to come and be a part of that class. And Dr. Beasley is going to talk about a lot of that. Colleges will pay for great students. One of the things I would suggest is you want to be a big fish in a small pond. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about merit money versus need-based money. I think it's critically important that families understand the concept of supply and demand. There's a school like Harvard has a tremendous amount of demand, but not a whole lot of supply. There are only so many seats. Okay, other schools may have a whole lot of supply, but not nearly enough demand. Okay, the way to understand this is, where does the X cross the Y for your situation? There are schools out there that do not have endowments. They rely solely on loans and work-study programs to provide any source of financial aid. And I think what's critically important is that you study the endowment per student. So if you go back a slide for a second, and we talk about a school like Grinnell College as an example. Well, Grinnell has $1.8 billion in their endowment. Indiana University has slightly more at $2 billion in their endowment. The difference is Indiana University has about 45,000 students. Grinnell College has about 1,700 students. Where do you think you can spread that money further? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Beasley, but let me give a little bit of an introduction. Dr. Beasley runs Beasley College Prep. He's based in the Dallas, Texas area, and he's an internationally recognized expert on college education and preparation. He's been in the trenches of this. He was a college professor for 16 years, and he's been the dean of the New College Prep Academy, which he'll talk about a little bit. Since 1996, he's been the dean of the National Homeschool Academy, and since 2009, president of Beasley College Prep. His college prep programs have been used by public and private schools in 16 states and by individual students across the globe. He was telling me just the other day about a family, I believe he said was in China, an American family, but they happened to be living in China that was using his services. He's helped thousands of students make better grades, increase their SAT, ACT, or other standardized test scores, and create more scholarship opportunities. Dr. Beasley's education includes a BS from Texas Christian University, who, by the way, did pretty well in the NCAA baseball tournament here very recently. An MBA from Oklahoma City University, as well as a master's in divinity from Tyndale Seminary, and a PhD from the University of Texas at Arlington. So suffice it to say, he's a very well-educated man. That's not to mention his military background as well. I'll let him talk about that a little bit. But here's what's most impressive to me. He completed 22 years of college and paid for only one semester. So he's been there, he's done that, he's got experience. In 2013, Dr. Beasley's students earned over $3.2 million in scholarships and over 50 full-ride scholarships. So by all means, he knows the ropes of this business. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Beasley, and we're really excited to have you here this evening. Thank you for carving out time from your busy schedule, and I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Brock. Can everybody hear me okay?
I believe so.
Okay, good. I'll make sure we have this. And Brock said I run these businesses, and I've been in the education business for almost 20 years. And it's kind of fortuitous that you did mention Harvard and what has happened at Harvard, what goes on at Harvard. My wife graduated cum laude from Harvard last Thursday. So we went up there for commencement. It was a very inspiring experience, and it's been a long road for my wife. Many of you don't know that when I met my wife, she was a high school dropout, and she went from high school dropout to graduating from Harvard with honors, and we qualified at Harvard for both merit and need-based aid. And I need to tell you that my total cost for Harvard for my wife was less than 1 year at a state college. There are ways of understanding how to access money. And I know this talks about, how to use other people's money. The best people's money you can use is the money that the college has. And so there are many different ways in which we work with students to find money for college. Now, we work both with students, and we have 5 areas of money that we work with. First, of course, is merit aid. And that merit aid is what you commonly refer to as scholarships, but it's more than just academic scholarships. There are scholarships, of course, for athletics. And in fact, I'm working with 2 students right now, one going to Oklahoma State and one going to the Citadel, who are on athletic scholarships. And we've got to get their test scores up so they can qualify for those scholarships. There's also activity-based scholarships, such as being on the dance team. Even the people who wave the flags at halftime around the band, there's scholarships for those people too. And there's scholarships for cheerleaders or being on the school newspaper. Then there's artistic-based scholarships, band scholarships, music scholarships. In fact, my oldest daughter got both an athletic scholarship and a music scholarship to Texas Wesleyan University many years ago. So when we think of merit-based is just not academic. Merit-based includes athletic activities and artistic types of scholarships that are available. The other one we look at is opportunity money. Opportunity money, that's like ROTC. A lot of people don't realize that ROTC is one of the major sources of college funding. Indeed, the military itself is the largest single payer of college education in the United States. 3 services, the Army, Navy, and Air Force, provide ROTC scholarships. And those scholarships allow you to go to any college that has that particular form of ROTC. And as long as you're admitted to the college, the ROTC will pay for your education. Indeed, I went to Texas Christian University on an Army ROTC scholarship. The Army paid for everything, plus gave me $100 a month spending money, which was a lot of money back a long time ago when I went and got my bachelor's degree. And so, and I've worked with a lot of students to get ROTC scholarships. And one of the things about ROTC scholarships is once you get them, you become a money magnet. And schools will start throwing stuff at you in order to attract that ROTC money because Uncle Sam will pay retail. And we had a case about 2 years ago. We had a young man get an Air Force ROTC scholarship, and USC, University of Southern California, sent representatives to his house begging him to come to USC. And this happened after the deadline for applications. And they offered him room and board. They offered him credit at the bookstore. There's all kinds of things and inducements that people are offered for ROTC scholarships. Now, the other thing is opportunity money is there's private scholarships that are available. There's an incredible number of private scholarships that are out there that most people do not know about. And I've compiled a reference guide on how to access some 15,000 sources of private scholarships. And a lot of them, of course, are going to require grades and test scores and an essay. And some of them are competitive. In fact, I just was going over a private scholarship application from one of the technology companies based on a student's acceptance to Boys State, which is a very big kudo, by the way. A lot of colleges that will actually award additional money for students who attend Boys State or Girls State. And so this particular scholarship was a veteran scholarship. I don't know if any of you know that Boys State and Girls State is sponsored by the American Legion and the American Legion Auxiliary. The American Legion itself is one of the greatest sources of information for college funding. They used to publish a book called a book on all of the sources for private education. They don't do them anymore because they converted to having the information online. Opportunity money also includes work study, and there's also places on campus that where students can find money. We call this campus money. We had one young lady who attended college here in Texas, and when we got a hold of her, she didn't have very high SAT scores. We got her scores up about 200 points, and she managed to get a half scholarship. And once we got her on campus, she hunted around and managed to pick up a resident advisor's position, which picked up the balance of her tuition, plus gave her free room and board and $300 every 2 weeks. And after her first year, because of her GPA, they bumped the academic end, which bumped everything else, and she was making $500 every 2 weeks. And her last year, she graduated in 3 years, by the way, with a 4.0. Her last year, she became a head resident advisor, got a very large bump in what she was making. And this young lady went to college, essentially more than free. They actually gave her money. She actually made money going to college. And that can actually happen if you have the right set of circumstances. The other is need-based. Now, Rock does a lot of work with need-based, and you have to understand that need-based does not mean needy, okay? You don't have to be poor to qualify for need-based aid. What you have to have is what's called a cost of attendance, and the difference between the cost of attendance and what is the expected family contribution. Expected family contribution comes from the free application of federal student aid. They said this is about how much you should be able to afford to pay for college, and if your cost of college is higher than that, the gap is called the need. And there are all kinds of ways of filling that gap through grants and even loans to fill that gap in what they call self-help aid. There's a lot of ways of filling that gap, and there's a lot of creativity allowed in that. And then we get to entitlement aid. Entitlement aid, every American citizen and legal resident is entitled to some form of federal aid. It may be a grant, it may be a loan, but there's an entitlement. Entitlements carry over to things like in-state and out-of-state tuition. If you're a resident of the state, you are entitled to pay lower tuition. Same thing with in-district or out-of-district for community colleges. There are certain aspects of entitlement aid that have to do with reciprocity. Reciprocity has to do with living in a state that has a reciprocity agreement with a neighboring state. that says that students from states, for example, in Virginia, in certain circumstances, can attend a college in Louisiana and get in-state tuition from Louisiana. We do this a lot where I am in Texas, because Texas has reciprocity with Louisiana and Arkansas. And Arkansas and Louisiana often siphon off a lot of good students from Texas because they offer financial inducements in the form of scholarships. And finally, there's your own money, and there's where people like Brock come in, is that they want to minimize your exposure so that you can qualify for a greater range of their pupils' money. Of course, every college in the United States will accept your cash, your check, your credit card, but we want to minimize that so that your money can be spent for more important things like your iMac and spring break and the summer in Europe and things like that.
Those are very important things.
Oh yeah, that's one of the things that we do when we talk to the students, and we incentivize the students by saying, your mom and dad's going to have to spend this much money if you don't get a scholarship, and so
Dr. Beasley, why don't we focus on and a lot of this, I sort of let the cat out of the bag with talking about some of your credentials and that type of thing. I know that there's plenty that I left out, but I'd like to dive in a little bit on, sort of your process and what you do and that sort of thing with regard to kind of your mission of preparing and packaging and positioning the student. So maybe talk a little bit about the specifics there. That'd be great.
Okay. We want to prepare our students. Indeed, we start as early as the 6th grade. Most of the students in our program who start with us in the 6th grade, we prepare for the Duke Talent Identification Program. We have been one of the largest feeders of 6th and 7th graders to the Duke Talent Identification Program. A lot of people may not be familiar with it, but Duke University wants to identify the top of the students in the United States. And we have a program where we can get students qualified for that program. And this last weekend, 3 of our students received both state and grand recognition as 7th graders because they scored they have 2 7th graders that scored higher than 50% of the seniors on the SAT and the ACT. We had 1 7th grader score higher than 90% of seniors on the SAT and ACT. Now, students who get into this program, their path to college all of a sudden becomes a yellow brick road because they're on the college radar and they've already scored high enough to qualify for scholarships. We've had, in the last 5 years, we've had 12 students qualify for the Duke TIP and become recognized for that. So we start early, and we want the students to begin their process. We have a thing we call learning dynamics. We teach them how to read, study, test, and write better, faster, and easier. They're able to make higher grades. They're able to move through their courses better. We do a thing called Jump Start at the beginning of each term, where we train them to get ahead so that they're never playing catch up, because we tell students that if you can't keep up, you can't catch up. And then, of course, we begin constantly doing the test prep, because believe it or not, the SAT and the ACT are the single most important variables for admissions and scholarships. Indeed, 80% of the colleges in the country will admit you on your test scores alone, and 80% will offer you funding based on your test scores alone. We work with a lot of homeschoolers, and because homeschoolers essentially don't have an official transcript, the only thing they have to go on are their test scores, and we've had students get between $300,000 and $800,000 in scholarship offers just based on their test scores alone. Now, we do this preparation process, and we want to prepare the students and start as early as we can. And we start as early as the 6th grade, as early as we can. And then as we begin to package students, we package them, and we're looking at the 5 elements of packaging students: their grades, their class rank, their experiences. When I say experiences, did they have a job? Did they have volunteer work? Were they in the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the Civil Air Patrol, things like that? And then there's their activities. These are the things that are more associated with schools, whether they're in band, football team, or something like that. Athletic, artistic, or they members of the math club or something like that. We want to get those activities. And then finally, their test scores. And again, test scores being the single most important variable. We want to put the package together because we want to make the student attractive both for admissions to the particular colleges and to be attractive to get the college to give them money. And then finally, in our positioning process, we have a four-step positioning process. It's selection, admissions, funding, and enrichment. In our selection process, we determine, based on what the student has indicated they want to major in, and based on different factors of geography or mom and dad went to this college or whatever, we come up with a profile of colleges, and we do a thing called a college grid. And based on this college grid, we begin to select college into three different levels. We have what's called reach colleges. These are colleges that, we're going to take a shot at trying to get in, or we may or may not get in. Then we have level colleges. We look for about 4 level colleges. These are colleges we're going to get in, and we might get some money out of them. And then we have about 4 safe colleges. We're going to get into these colleges, and they're going to give us money. Now, what happens with a lot of our students is that because they've been in our program and have taken advantage of the resources that we've given them, a lot of those reach colleges become safe colleges, just because the students are just incredibly qualified to not only get admitted, but to receive scholarship money. Then as we go through the admissions process, most people really don't understand the admissions process. We have to do a lot of this online with the Common App, and a lot of the states. A lot of the states will have their own applications. And, I have to tell you, most parents and most students need to have somebody other than their mom and dad to look at these applications, because sometimes they can be a little complicated. And so we work on the admissions process, and then things like their essays. And I hate to really say this, but one of the worst people you could get to help you with your essay is your English teacher, because they're going to teach you to write an essay. It's going to get an A in English class. But the essay you have to write for college is going to be a totally different animal. It's totally different focused, and the formatting and the way you organize it, you got to have a killer title and a killer first line. So that. Okay. So, and then what we want to work on here are options, choices, and opportunities. We want kids to have this. I mean, most kids don't realize that they have options and choices because they don't know they exist. We talked to several parents, and I remember I was talking with a parent yesterday. I said, "Gosh, I didn't even know that these kinds of opportunities existed, or that we could access these things." And a lot of times, the colleges aren't going to volunteer this information, particularly when it comes to funding. So sometimes you got to drag it out of them. So that's our goal, to do these things. And Brock, you need to jump in here someplace.
Sure. Well, what I think is important, obviously, to your point, provide the range of options, choices, and opportunities. Let's talk a little bit about the cost. I mean, I read a statistic a while back that said that for the American family, the second greatest fear next to running out of money in retirement was paying for college. I'm just curious how you see it. And I know, like I said early on, for most families, their money's kind of in 2 places. But let's talk through that a little bit.
Okay. Well, prior to 2009, the family home was the biggest family investment. And since 2009, it's the cost of sending the first kid to college. And not only sending the first kid, but if you get other kids, it's like, having to buy a completely new house for each kid, and you're not going to get any equity out of this. So the cost of going to college is outpacing the ability of the average American family to earn, much less save. In fact, we did a test on, if a family put away X amount of dollars, that in some cases, if they started when the student entered the first grade, based on the inflation rate of college tuition, it would be almost a financial impossibility to save enough money for college. And so that's why you have to find somebody who's going to be able to effectively give you the financial strategy that's going to prepare you for paying for college. In fact, one of the things that I took from the Harvard graduation with my wife was that the Associate Dean of Harvard said that nowadays you have to have an expert to navigate college. And she is so right, because you have to understand that you have to have a family doctor and a family dentist, and sometimes you'll need a lawyer. but the biggest amount of money you're going to spend for your family will be for college, and you need to have somebody just as smart about college as a doctor is smart about tonsillitis. And a lot of people don't realize this, so they go up there and they navigate this by themselves. They go in and they take on huge debt, and the kids end up spending the rest of their life paying off this college debt. College
Well,
debt
and the
is
other
an
challenge is
incredible monster.
it's sort of a moving target because the cost of college is not getting less; it's getting more.
Yes. Colleges last year, public colleges last year jumped an average of $9,000 a year. That's just in 1 year. So that's increasing the cost of college from, in this case, in Louisiana Tech, is $10,000 a year. This is a second-tier regional college in Louisiana, and they jumped $10,000 a year. That's $40,000 over a 4-year college degree. Now, unfortunately, these two students that we had here, we got them full rides there. They don't have to pay anything. In fact, even the room and board is tossed in. But to see that the people who don't get these scholarships to go to a second-tier regional college, okay, it's still going to cost them $150,000. Now, it's very important to realize that, again, if the cost of college is increasing $10,000 a year, what's it going to cost by the time you're a third grader, you're a sixth grader, or even your junior? It's going to, because if you're looking at tuition rates right now, you're going to be $10,000 or $20,000 per year more to go to these particular colleges. And so we have to get our kids to start early. Parents have to start early with financial planning. Students need to start early with overall college strategies. Okay, what's next, Brock?
Well, so I think the natural question becomes, how do you pay for it?
Well, most people pay for it with debt, and it's sad. Largest segment of personal debt in the United States. It exceeds all credit card debt. It exceeds all automobile loans, and there's some stuff that there's going to have to be some heavy payback with this, because right now, and these are some estimates that we have, by 2020, the average debt is going to be about $100,000 per student. By 2025, the college debt will be the single largest monthly payment. And by this slide here, by 2030, 70% of college grads won't be able to get a mortgage because of the huge college debt. I mean, take for example, two people get married and they've got $150,000 of debt each. They've got $300,000 of debt. That's sucking up a significant amount of their personal income, and technically they don't have enough money to buy a house. And that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, and I don't know if we'll be able to conquer the challenges of 2030 in tonight's phone call, but let's talk about for the families who are on the phone. What do you find? And you talked a little bit about this in terms of packaging, but my question was, what's the most important factor in admissions and funding from your perspective?
The SAT and ACT scores. We have these factors here, and the most important is sitting there at the bottom, the test scores. Okay? Like I said earlier, we can admit and get scholarship money on test scores alone. And that's one of the things that we really focus on. We prep the sophomore year. We focus heavily on it on the junior year. In fact, a vast majority of our students hit their numbers at the end of the junior year, which means they've got high enough scores that they've got 2 or 3 scholarships sitting in their back pocket before the end of the senior year. That's really the goal that we have, is to have the students incredibly well positioned before they go into their senior year, provided they start with us soon enough. Now, we've had seniors come in, and we've been able to pull off a couple of miracles with seniors. And sometimes we recommend that students take gap years because, and this is an actual case. I mean, I was dealing with a student. We were debating a gap year, and I looked at him straight in the eye and I said, would you take a gap year if I paid you $100,000? And he said, yes. I said, you know what? If you take a gap year, that's how much money you're going to save for college. because we'll get you better prepared and get you scholarships so that that $100,000 is not going to have to be paid. If you put it in the perspective of, that gap year will save you $100,000, in some cases $150,000, it's not a bad idea to take a gap year. And, we work with a lot of students, and we have a very specific gap year program because we catch students from all different areas, and, they have differing degrees of people who have helped them and the expertise that they have access to. So we have all kinds of different strategies that we can use to help somebody get better prepared, better packaged, and better positioned for college funding.
Well, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about exactly what you do to help the families find what I've been calling other people's money.
Okay. Again, we went through this, different types of aid: the merit aid, the opportunity aid, need-based aid, entitlement aid, and of course, your own money. And we focus a great deal on merit aid for a significant number of our people, and then we also do a lot of need-based aid. In fact, we've just working with Corpus Christi Independent School District, Corpus Christi, Texas, 7 high schools. We've taken 100 of their juniors, and we're taking those juniors through our program. And because of certain opportunities in Texas, which we call an opportunity program, based on their income, Texas colleges will waive their tuition and fees if their incomes are below a certain level. And Audra just did a chart indicating the first group of students and where they have already qualified to be admitted and to qualify to get this program that's going to waive their tuition and fees. And because of their income, they're going to get a Pell Grant on top of that. And then in Texas, they have a Texas Grant. There are other states that have similar programs. And of course, we're based in Texas, and this is a program in Texas that we're doing, but it's a very heavy-duty need-based program. We also work with a lot of veterans, people in the military. A lot of people who are in the military don't realize the range of entitlement aid that they can get, not only from the federal Veterans Administration, but from their state Veterans Administration. Where we are in Texas, we have a program for veterans who have exhausted their GI Bill. The state allows them to go to college, to state colleges for free, and now that privilege is extended to spouses and to children. And so veterans in Texas can send kids and spouses to college and have their tuition and fees waived. Now, there are other states have very similar programs. People don't know about it. And so that's one of the things we do is we dig and we figure out what kind of opportunities do these people have.
All right, I think that's great.
Okay.
And I'm sure we'll circle back on some of that. So let's talk a little bit about we get questions all the time regarding negotiation. So let's talk a little bit, because I think that's sort of near and dear to families these days. Of oftentimes you look at the college as this, big, insurmountable institution. And just like you said earlier about a different topic, a lot of times parents don't understand that it is a negotiable offer, that when they get that student aid report, it is not necessarily the best and final offer. So let's talk a little bit about how parents can negotiate and the process, and what you at Beasley College Prep do to work with these families to get them more aid from the schools.
Well, first we have to find schools that have wiggle room. In a previous session we had with you, we talked about this thing called alibi money. Please don't use that term when you talk to the financial aid office. It's like putting a cross in front of a vampire. This is kind of an inside term that's used, alibi money. And a lot of colleges will give offers out for financial aid. And, of course, students will get financial aid offers from multiple institutions, and they'll choose where they want to go. Well, some of the money that they offered is foundation money. It has to be distributed. And so you can always go back and see if some of that foundation money that has been returned can get redistributed. And you go to the financial aid office and you camp out. I mean, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. I'm going to give you a case that I'm working on right now. Is that I have mom who is a middle school principal whose son graduated this year, and he's looking at a particular college, and they got this thing that if he's in the top 25% of his class, he's going to get this big chunk of money. Well, mathematically, he came in at someplace like the 26%, just under the first quarter. And so what we're doing is we're negotiating with the college and saying, this is really close, and going back to the school and having them recalculate the class rank and recalculate. There's all kinds of things. In fact, at this particular school, we had the opportunity to negotiate right up until the first day of class. And so we're continuing to negotiate and camping out. So you never, ever give up. And I take in case in point with my wife at Harvard. We went to every potential place we could get money. We camped out. We constantly called. We constantly followed up. And you have to be persistent with finding other ways of getting aid. And then, I hate to put it in these terms, but sometimes the financial aid officer will throw you a bone just to get rid of you. But you have to be persistent, because we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And I don't have any pride when it comes to this. I'll sit down and I'll do tears and I'll be persistent, because this is a lot of money. So never give up. Never ever give up. Keep trying.
I think that's great advice. So let me just stop there for a second, and I want to take some time to make sure that we get as many questions answered as possible. And Dr. Beasley, we've got a great question here regarding home equity. If I'm certainly happy to answer that if you'd like to dive into it from your perspective, because I know you know the answer as well as I do. So feel free, you can field that one if you'd like. But by the way, if anybody does have other questions, feel free. You can type in there at the bottom of the chat window. You can type in any questions that you have, whether you've got questions for us or you've got questions for Dr. Beasley. We want to take just a time out here and get some of those questions answered before we do wrap up.
Okay. Well, home equity in the FAFSA process, the free application with the federal student aid, home equity is not a factor. However, if you're going to a private school that uses the College Scholarship Service or the CSS, home equity becomes a factor. So that's one of the things you have to understand when you're looking at the selection of your colleges. Places like Stanford and Notre Dame will look at the CSS, and they have no problems asking you to dig into your home equity to pay for college. The FAFSA doesn't factor that in.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I just today was working on a case with a family whose child is going to the University of Southern California, actually admitted for the spring semester, not for the fall. And home equity counts at a rate of 8%. So, you live in a $500,000 home and you own it free and clear. Multiply $500,000 times 8%. That's $40,000 towards your expected family contribution, and at some schools that's even greater than the full cost of attendance.
Right, and so it's I tend to, and again, there are strategies you can do to minimize your exposure, and of course you know them better than I do. But again, if on the other side of that, if the student had been properly prepared for merit-based aid, we probably could have bypassed all of that.
Yeah, we've got some really good questions coming in, so I want to make sure we get through them. So question here regarding how can we put away tax money today to pay for future college, assuming you maxed out 529s and similar. I'll answer that question very quickly. I mean, depending, when you say you've maxed out 529 plans for a married couple, it's important to understand that the maximum that you can put away today under the IRS code is actually $140,000 per child. That's $70,000 per parent. And so you may not be getting the entire state tax deduction depending on your state, but you can still put an awful lot of money away. And I'll tell you, the bigger opportunity with Section 529 plans is actually the fact that you get federal tax, I'll say tax deferral, but really in most cases it's tax-free growth as long as the money's used for higher education. And so, maybe you're in a state that that only gives $2,500 or $4,000 or something like that dollars per year as the state tax deduction or state tax advantage. But keep in mind, oftentimes you can put an awful lot more away at the federal level under federal gift tax guidelines. And so happy to talk that through with you on an individual basis as well. Dr. Beasley, this one's for you. What did you call the money that colleges redistribute?
Alibi money. It's, alibi, like the alibi you have when police pick you up, think you committed a comp crime.
Yeah, and you made the good point. You don't necessarily want to go to the financial aid officer and say, hey, how about you find some of that alibi money? But just understand the process that inevitably students are admitted. Let's just generically say students are admitted in March and they have to let the school know by May 1st. Well, during that time, some students who may have been offered a scholarship, maybe a student applied to, making up a school. They applied to a school in their home state. They applied to the University of Maryland, but they got into Johns Hopkins. Well, and they decide to go to Johns Hopkins. Well, maybe the University of Maryland had given them some merit-based aid that they now are not taking because they have decided that they want to go to Johns Hopkins, as an example. So I think that's, just understand that money is out there and can be found. But to your point, I wouldn't necessarily call it alibi money to the financial aid officer. What's the best way to finance medical school? Home equity, private loan, other?
None of the above. None of the above. Okay. It's odd too, because I had this man come in yesterday, talk about medical school. We have a pretty extensive medical school, law school, dental school, vet school prep program where we do MCAT, LSAT, prep, and I'm one of 3 people, by the way, certified in both Canada and the United States for the DAT, the dental aptitude test. A lot of people don't realize most of the Canadian dentists are trained in the United States because they don't have enough dental schools in Canada. So I've had business from Canada to get into American dental schools. But the best way, and quite frankly, this is the best way, is the military. The military will pay for your medical school if you will give the military some time back. And people say, well, I really don't want to do that. Well, quite frankly, you cannot find a better place to do your internship and your residency than the military, because you're going to be exposed to the greatest range of experiences that when you get back into the civilian hospitals, you're going to be years ahead of your peer group when it comes to that. So the one best way is with the military. Now, the overall best way is have a high MCAT score and very high GPA, because you can get scholarships. We've had one of our students get the top scholarship to medical school. It's called the MSTP scholarship, the Medical Scientist Training Program, where the student graduates with both an MD and a PhD degree. It covers the full cost of medical school plus a stipend for living. And we have this particular young lady from Colorado. She's attending medical school in Texas, and but there's only like 140 of those awarded. But she had the MCAT scores and she had the grades, and she managed to do it. So I'd have to say, if you don't have the greatest grades and you don't have the greatest MCAT score, but you've been admitted to medical school, the military is probably one of the best places you can go to finance your medical school. If you do have the grades and you do have the MCAT scores, there are places that are going to give you funding, and you also have to choose the right school. You need to make sure that you're going to go to a school that's affordable, because you may end up having to take loans. And if you have to take loans, go to a school that doesn't cost as much, because quite frankly, people don't pick their doctor based on where the doctor went to medical school. And so where you go to medical school is really not as important as you think it is. I mean, how many people on this broadcast know where their doctor went to medical school, or even went to undergraduate, or your dentist? But some people think, it's important they go to a high-profile school. That profile kind of rubs off on them after they leave. It's where they did their internship and their residency that really is more important than where they went to medical school.
Well, and I'd add to that too. Just Stephen, you asked the question, and whatever dollars you potentially do pay out of pocket. In other words, if you can't find enough other people's money, then that's where it comes on to an advisor's shoulders, like what we do at the College Funding Coach. And Mary, I would say, Mary, you asked a really good question, but the challenge is they're good questions, but they're very specific to your financial situation. So it's hard to say, you said, I'm currently contributing to the Maryland 529 prepaid plan. Should I continue to do that, or should I do the savings variety plan? It's a great question, and the same thing too with you, Stephen, but without knowing anything about your particular financial circumstances, it's hard to give you really good advice. So I'm more than happy to spend 10, 15 minutes on the phone with you and maybe talk through some of the ways that we may be able to create good strategies. I've got about 2 or 3 more. I'm going to try to cruise through these so we can get you out here in time. Let's see. Pam asked if a particular college's net price calculator on their website tells you will qualify for 0 need-based aid. Do you think that's pretty accurate? And merit-based money is the best course? Simple answer on that. As a general rule, yes, unless something changes dramatically with your financial circumstances, in which case you would go back to the school. But as a general rule, if the net price calculator says your EFC, your expected family contribution, is above the cost of attendance, then as a general rule, that's sort of where you are in terms of need-based aid, and then you walk down the path of merit-based aid, which is what we've been talking about.
Let me break in here, Brock, because I think I got something very important to share. You've got to be careful on these net price calculators, because we've had parents, when it says the parent put in their information, not the student's information, in the net price calculator. We actually had a parent do this for the FAFSA, and so you have to be very careful when you do these net price calculators and when you do the FAFSA forecaster, because when you're filling it out as a parent, you've got to say, I'm the kid, I'm not the parent. So I'm not going to put my savings in there. So it's because we've had people have problems with the net price calculator, and they come back and they said 0, and I said, I don't think so, and I've gone back and redone it and found out that yes, they do. It's ditto with the FAFSA forecaster and other things. So you need to check what you're doing, and maybe you need another set of eyes to check your work.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's see, Karen, I'm going to come back on your question regarding Dr. Beasley and how they work and how you can contact them. Amanda, your question is very simple. Does a 529 savings account count as parent savings or child savings? It counts as a parental asset if it's inside of a 529 plan. Let's see. I think we covered the rest of that. Just last question here, and then if anybody does have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And that question is, if you have your emergency fund, does that hurt you in terms of college, saying you can contribute to that to your child's college savings? The answer is, as a general rule, yes. If you've got money in non-qualified investments, meaning stocks, bonds, mutual funds, bank accounts, it all counts in the formula. And as a general rule at FAFSA schools, it counts at a rate of 5.64%. So we can talk about that more as we go. And so, the bad news is, and where we started off on this, and I want to be cognizant of people's time. We're right at an hour, so I want to make sure we wrap up. Again, I'm happy to be a resource for you. The bad news is that college is really, really expensive. And for most families, as Dr. Beasley pointed out, it is one of, if not their largest expense that they have in their lifetime. But the reality is that you can do it. It's certainly possible. What the College Funding Coach does as advisors is that we help work with families to identify local financial advisors who can help. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I always say you can't plan for college in a vacuum. You've got to do comprehensive financial planning. College is too expensive to really plan in a vacuum. And so what we do, again, we partner with local financial planning firms who focus on college funding strategies. And what I think that you'll be able to find is that you can attend a more prestigious or a less crowded or a private school for the same net cost, or in many cases, even less than a state school. I think it's really important that you become an informed buyer and that you start early. If you've got questions about any of this, I would just suggest that you call us, email us. You can call Andrea Ashton at the phone number there, which is 703-430-0789, to schedule a time to talk. And I'd also ask that you join us next time. We'll do our next webinar in September, on September the 23rd at both noon and 8 p.m. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex Corey to wrap everything up.
Thank you guys again for joining us this evening. Please feel free to call our office at 703-424-2401. Also, you can visit thecollegefundingcoach.org if you'd like to check out our upcoming workshops for next year. And please do like us on Facebook and check out our most recent blog. This webinar will also be placed up on YouTube, so that you can view it there if you missed any part of it. And please follow us on Twitter, and you can check out Brock's profile on LinkedIn. Thank you again for joining us. This is a team that works with the College Funding Coach, and all of these advisors are available to meet with you. And we do thank you again for joining us this evening.